I got a call from my self-centered sister-in-law out of the blue. She told me she left her baby at our doorstep and asked me to take care of it for a week. But there was a big problem. I had moved out of that house just the day before. When I told her this, she started yelling at me, saying she was overseas and demanding that I find the baby immediately. I panicked and drove back to the old house. But there was no baby to be found. I realized I needed to call the police. As I dialed the number with shaky hands, I remembered something truly shocking. I've been married to Scott for 10 years, but we never had children. I'm 38 now, and my younger sister-in-law, Lindsay, who's 5 years younger, often takes advantage of me. Her husband is a big shot, and mine works for him, so Lindsay always asks me to do things for her. It's usually just a quick drive away. But ever since she got pregnant, she's been making more demands, even making me clean and cook for her. I love helping people, but I've been telling my husband that Lindsay is being too selfish. He keeps asking me to help her out a bit longer, promising he'll talk to her husband about it. But it seems like he's influenced by Lindsay's husband too. So reluctantly, I keep going to Lindsay's whenever she calls. Oh, my stomach feels so heavy. Michelle, can you grab the TV remote for me? Huh? What? Even though she was only 3.5 months pregnant, her belly looked bigger than expected. But she was naturally a bit plump, so I didn't say anything. Maybe it'd be good for your health to move around a bit, I suggested. Don't tell me what to do when you've never been pregnant, she snapped back. Taking care of this baby is important for our future. What's wrong with that? She lounged on the couch, keeping her arrogant attitude, which started getting on my nerves. But when I questioned if you could know the baby's gender at 3.5 months, she got angry. You're so old-fashioned. Nowadays, you can find out the gender early, Lindsay insisted, and I didn't feel like arguing, so I just listened to her complaints. You're just jealous because you can't have a baby. It's not good for the baby's development. If anything happens, it's your fault. She started using the unborn baby to threaten me, making it hard to be around her. I quickly finish my tasks and leave feeling suffocated by Lindsay's behavior. When I talked to my husband after work, he comforted me, saying just hang in there a little longer. But despite his words, I still felt uneasy. It was hard to keep feeling this way. I started making excuses whenever Lindsay called, avoiding her requests. But then she complained to my husband, saying I was being mean to her, which left me feeling lost. Even when I said I was busy, she ignored it and kept calling. Eventually, I had to pick up, and she screamed at me, threatening my brother's job at the company, reminding me that her husband was the president. My husband, always gentle and trying to avoid trouble, urged me to go to Lindsay's place. Time went by, and Lindsay gave birth to a boy a month early. The baby weighed over 140, which seemed big for a premature birth. But not knowing much about pregnancy, I accepted it. Lindsay named him Chris, and after she left the hospital, she called me to take care of him, saying it would be good practice for when I had my home. Despite my annoyance with Lindsay, I visited her every time she called, thinking she must be struggling after giving birth. Plus, Chris was just too cute. Chris, you're such a good boy. Grow up healthy. Changing diapers and bathing him didn't feel like a chore when I saw his face. But after 3 months, Lindsay started leaving Chris at my house more often. What's going on? You're all dressed up, I asked. I have a dinner with people from my husband's work. You take care of Chris while I'm out, she said, as she regained her strength. I realized how busy the wife of a president could be, and I took care of the baby diligently, but Lindsay started leaving Chris with me more often. Thanks for today. Isn't this too much? Are you just accompanying your husband? My husband is handling an important deal, and I'm helping out. You should too, Lindsay said, forcing Chris onto me and rushing out. I couldn't help but wonder if she was really helping with that flimsy dress she was wearing. Despite my doubts, I couldn't ignore the baby, so I took care of him as usual. But that day was different. When I changed his diaper, Chris had diarrhea. He seemed energetic and didn't have a fever, so I made sure to keep the room warm. In the evening, when Lindsay came to pick up Chris, I told her about it. She accused me loudly, saying I did something to Chris out of spite. I denied it, just as my husband Scott came home. What's all this noise in the entryway, Scott? I trusted your wife with Chris, and now he has diarrhea, Lindsay said, her usually harsh tone turning meek as she started crying. I understand your concern, but Michelle doesn't have much experience with babies. It might have just been a bit cold today. I'll apologize on her behalf, so please forgive her. My husband defended me. I felt puzzled why I had to apologize when I hadn't done anything wrong. I saw Lindsay and Chris off, feeling frustrated. While making dinner in a low mood, my husband suddenly got serious and took out an envelope from his bag. Michelle, we need to talk about something important. Dinner can wait. Please sit down, he said, spreading out documents on the table. The words he told me were shocking, something I never imagined. But seeing his determination, I nodded quietly. A week later, while I was unpacking boxes, Lindsay called. I left a bag at your entrance. Take care of him for a week. What? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. It's my baby, of course. You've already brought him inside, haven't you? After hearing the whole story, it turned out that since I wasn't home, she had put Chris in a bag and hung it on the doorknob. Hearing this, I panicked. Wait a minute. We moved out yesterday. We're not going back to that house. Please go and pick up Chris right away. But Lindsay didn't believe me, saying, What? Lying again. When I insisted it was true, she suddenly panicked. It turns out she left Chris 5 hours ago. Plus, I was shocked to learn she was currently on an overseas trip. Despite it being spring, it was still chilly outside. Go pick up Chris now. Hurry up. More worried about the baby than angry at Lindsay, I immediately drove off. An hour later, I arrived at our old house and checked the entrance, but there was no sign of Chris. I checked the garden thoroughly and asked the neighbors, but no one saw anything, I said, feeling frustrated. I thought no crying or injuries either. What's happening? Feeling hopeless without any clues, I was about to call the police when my phone rang. What? What did you say? The call was so shocking that I couldn't even speak. After hanging up, I was so stunned that I just wandered around until Lindsay called. He was in the eco bag at the entrance, right? He's not there. I can't find him anywhere. This is bad. If we don't find Chris, my husband might divorce me. It'll be your fault if we don't find him, Lindsay said, her voice trembling with panic over the phone. Since there was nothing else to do, I told her I would report to the police and ask for help, but she adamantly refused. Doing that will make it a big deal, and my husband will find out. Chris' safety is more important than your reputation. Chris is just a tool to extract money from my husband, Lindsay said, revealing her selfishness, unconcerned about me. I could hear Lindsay talking with someone else. Later she said, This trip is ruined. I couldn't get a flight today, but I'm coming back tomorrow. Don't tell my husband anything. If you find Chris, contact me immediately. I'll do what I can. After I agreed, Lindsay hung up. The next day at the airport, Lindsay arrived with a man, looking displeased. Michelle, what are you doing here? Did you find Chris? I came to tell you something important. Chris has gone somewhere you can't reach. It's too late, Lindsay said, panicking as I looked sad. You're lying. What am I supposed to tell my husband, you useless thing? Find a baby that looks like him right now. How can you say that? Are you even a mother? Lindsay suggested finding a baby of the same age to deceive her husband. Overwhelmed with anger and sadness, tears started to flow. But I wiped them away and met her gaze firmly. Instead of looking for a similar child, talk to this person, I said, as a woman hiding behind me, her face covered by a deep hood, revealed herself. Both Lindsay and the man with her started trembling. Yes, this woman was the wife of Lindsay's affair partner. The man was too shocked to move as his wife confronted him, yelling, You scum, I'll knock some sense into you. He pleaded pathetically, Please forgive me. But his wife was unforgiving, telling him bite down hard, and then slapped him repeatedly. The force was so strong that passersby stopped to watch. After leaving the man collapsed and clutching his cheek, she turned to face Lindsay. Lindsay quickly begged and started talking fast. Listen, don't get it wrong. We're not in that kind of relationship. What? Hey, Michelle, stop recording with your smartphone. Lindsay snapped, seeing me recording the scene. But I remained calm. Then how do you explain this? I pulled out an envelope containing emails between Lindsay and her affair partner, along with cozy photos of them from social media. Lindsay tried to grab them from me, glaring menacingly. Snooping like that is despicable. How did you find his wife's contact information? I actually met his wife by chance, I said. When I saw Lindsay's affair partner on social media, His face seemed familiar. After thinking, I realized he was the husband of the woman who works at my regular hair salon. He too was a hairstylist, but unlike his successful wife, who owned several shops and was skilled, he was known for not working and just playing around. He was a typical husband living off his wife's success. When I told his wife about Lindsay's affair trip, she said, "I've reached my limit. I'm joining in." She came with me, and I was honestly surprised at how terrifying she could be when angry, considering she's usually gentle and kind. The playboy hairstylist couldn't stand up to his wife and kept begging, "Please don't divorce me." Watching her steadfast refusal, I felt determined. Plus, I started to wonder if Chris was born from the affair. "What? Don't make things up without proof," Lindsay said. "But he was born a month early and weighed over 140 grams. That's definitely too big. Have you been fudging the weeks?" I pulled out another envelope and showed her the documents inside. One was a maternal and child health handbook. Another proved that Lindsay's husband wasn't Chris' biological father. "You played dirty, but tearing this up won't erase what happened." Lindsay snatched the DNA test results from my hand and tore them up, looking pleased. But that wasn't going to let her off the hook. "You better talk directly to the person who gave me these documents," I said, showing Lindsay my smartphone. Her eyes widened, and she looked like she was about to scream. No wonder, the screen showed Lindsay's husband. I wasn't recording. I was on a video call with Lindsay's husband. "Lindsay, you lied about going to your parents' house and deceived me," he said. Lindsay stammered, not making much sense in response. Standing in front of her, I began to speak slowly. "Listen carefully. I'm going to explain everything step by step." A week ago, her husband, suspecting something, had requested a DNA test between himself and Chris. He also lied about going on a business trip for a week to monitor her actions. Lindsay, unaware of this, immediately contacted her lover by email and booked an overseas trip in a rush. She didn't even think to erase her browsing history on the day of the trip. After leaving Chris in an echo bag at the entrance of the house I was living in, Lindsay went off to the station humming a tune. Your husband followed her and took care of Chris. If he had been left at the entrance for over 5 hours, who knows what could have happened. What? So Chris is alive? Lindsay's husband exclaimed. Yes, he's with me now. The call I was about to make to the police when I couldn't find Chris was from Lindsay's husband. Surprised but eager to understand the situation fully, I immediately went to his house. Chris was full of energy, playing with a rattle. While hearing about the past events, I remembered that despite being born a month early, he weighed over 140 ounces. At the time, I reluctantly accepted it, but I indeed thought it was strange. With Lindsay's husband's permission, I searched through Lindsay's belongings and found her maternal and child health handbook. Looking at its contents, I discovered that Lindsay had falsified the baby's weeks. Why did Lindsay do such a thing? Looking back at the actual timing of her pregnancy, it was exactly when her husband was away on a long business trip for about 2 months. Therefore, it was impossible for him to be the father of the baby. Realizing that she was pregnant with her lover's child, Lindsay thought she could deceive everyone by fudging the birth month, especially since the baby turned out to be unexpectedly big. That's when I became suspicious. The person who was in love, and now everyone knows about the child, started saying sorry a lot to their wife. But their wife said coldly, "You'll have to manage on your own now," and gave them divorce papers. Then she kicked her crying husband and left. She walked away with confidence. Meanwhile, Lindsay's husband didn't stay quiet. He said, "I'm divorcing you, obviously. Go be with that other man." "No, I just thought he looked nice. He doesn't have any money. You were only with me for the money, right?" Lindsay got emotional as she admitted the truth. "You said Chris was just a way to get money from your husband." "Don't talk nonsense. I heard about your phone call yesterday from Michelle. I had recorded everything to make sure Lindsay couldn't deny it later." Lindsay's husband had been quietly listening until then, his face red with anger. When Lindsay was confronted with the truth, she seemed a bit scared at first. Then she looked at her phone and said, "If Chris is fine, then everything's okay, right? And even though he's not your biological child, I gave birth to him, so he's like your child." Both Lindsay's husband and I were shocked by her selfish reasoning. Thinking she had cleverly avoided the issue, Lindsay looked proud. But then her husband said, "It's over," and hung up the phone suddenly. Lindsay tried to call him back, but he had blocked her. Then I reminded her that leaving Chris alone in a bag and going out was against the law. She shook her head in disbelief. I showed her the law on my phone, and she suddenly got scared and collapsed. Lindsay, it's over between us. Goodbye. Giving Lindsay a cold glance, I walked away, feeling a shiver down my spine. When I looked back, I saw Lindsay's eyes were red, and she had a scary expression on her face. I'll tell Scott you're to blame for all of this because you moved without telling me. My husband decided to move because he felt sorry for me being used by you. He knows everything about what happened, and he never wants to see you again. Lindsay thought her brother would support her, but when she realized he had left her too, she screamed loudly. It's shocking how selfish someone can be, not once considering Chris. Stop crying and go get Chris right now. If I'm getting divorced, I don't need the baby. What kind of person are you? I won't forget what you said. Chris will never go back to you, no matter what. After cutting ties with my sister-in-law for good, I walked away with a strong determination. Later, I reported Lindsay's cruel act of abandoning the baby to the police. Although Chris was quickly kept safe, what Lindsay did was considered too heartless, and she faced serious consequences from the police. Lindsay ended up getting divorced by her husband and rejected by her own family, leaving her completely alone. She was sued by her ex-husband for leaving the baby and deceiving him, and he demanded $30,000 in compensation. Lindsay and her lover had to borrow money to pay the settlement, and because they'd borrowed from a sketchy company, Lindsay had to work in a shady place to pay off the debt. My determination was to raise Chris as my own child. When I shared this with my husband, he happily agreed. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, I'm also expecting a new baby. I'll take care of these children with love and make sure they have a happy and free life.